The most important thing that people remember when we go somewhere is how we feel around the people we visit.
Welcome to Truth Behind Travel podcast. I'm Dolores Semeraro, and this is my weekly show where tourism, travel, and hospitality industry professionals meet to discuss and share marketing strategies as they reshape the future of travel. If you want to learn the truth directly from the leaders and the doers of this industry, you are in the right place. Before you dive into today's episode, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on your favorite podcast app. And while you're on it, go on and follow the show on Instagram and Facebook at Truth Behind Travel Podcast. Hello, Dolores here, bringing you a brand new episode of Truth Behind Travel Podcast Season 4, focusing on impact. Today, we are knocking at the doors of a destination that has been in the spotlight a lot lately, and for all the good reasons. National Geographic has listed this destination one of the best in the world in its top 25 list for 2023 for the category Nature. And in 2022, Forbes magazine named this destination as one of the dream places you must visit at least once in your lifetime. The tourism board of this destination keeps scoring big wins year round, and there's nothing that stops them. So, today we are talking about Slovenia. On today's episode, the podcast guest comes straight from the heartbeat of the tourism industry of Slovenia, the Director General of the Ministry of Economy, Tourism and Sport, Dubravka, Kalin. During our conversation, Dubravka shares the work done behind the scene by all tourism stakeholders of Slovenia, no one excluded, to achieve the results that you're seeing today, and also the challenges that they faced along the way. So how does Slovenia Green Scheme work? And how are they embracing technology along the way? What practices work best and which one instead they wanted to avoid? Stay on this episode to hear it directly from the person who's got the fingers on the pulse of Slovenian tourism. Welcome, Dubravka. It's a pleasure to have you on the podcast. How are you?
Fine, thank you. Greetings from Slovenia.
So before we get to the Slovenia hotspot, I really would like to know, and I would like you to share with the podcast listeners your career journey, your path into tourism. What made you join the tourism industry?
Practically, my journey in tourism began more than 30 years ago as a student of history. Then I completed my first training as a tourist guide. And later, I also made the state exam and started to travel all around the world. And I was very passionate about it. I was really eager to know all these different cultures and people and so on. Later on, I started to work in a travel agency. And then when my girl started to go to the primary school, I decided to move back to my hometown to be with them, around them. So I started to work at the destination organization. I started to wonder, how can I present Slovenia? How can I present my whole hometown to the people that are coming to us? It was the whole new idea for me at that moment. But this path led me then to the Ministry of Tourism in directorates for tourism. So the whole Slovenia now is the destination I need to care about.
And very well known around Europe as well. And not only, in fact, in many practices in terms of not just sustainability, but really optimization of natural resource, how to best portray a destination's assets, not just avoiding to generate mass tourism or overcrowding certain places rather than others, right? And this is what happens with digital media nowadays. People see things on social media or on the internet, on various websites and blogs, and they just want to go there, just want to go in that specific place, and therefore generating a bit of overcrowding a specific location. What I noticed about Slovenia, that especially for the communication strategies that we have observed from the outside, of course, that the values of the Slovenians and the destination per se were very much aligned. So whatever was promised in the marketing message of the destination was delivered by the locals because everyone was on the same page. Where did you find most of the challenges in terms of, living up to that promise when tourists will come and say, hey, this is what I was expecting? And then were there moments where you had challenges in delivering upon that promise?
You can find Slovenia on the tourism map for the last 30 years, but the path wasn't always so easy. And Slovenia, for a long time, was not recognized as interesting country in the sense of tourism. When the country became independent, Slovenian tourism faced a challenge to place Slovenia alongside well-known and established tourism destinations. And despite its past tourist development, Slovenia had lost its appeal due to the 10 days war and the declaration of independence. But people are the core of tourism. We realized that people are the most important asset, of course, also the nature, because we are one of the greenest and one of the most forested countries in Europe. We have more than 60% of the forests. Somehow sustainability is in our DNA because we are used to live in the nature and according to nature's laws. But of course, we had to implement those ideas also in tourism. It was not always easy because when we began to deal with it, we first of all needed to attract people to come to Slovenia, and we did not want to happen to us the scenario of Spain, like after the fall of the Franco's regime, when they started to invite people from all over Europe, and the tourists were all of a sudden flooding the Spain. Now the tourist politicians are coming to Slovenia and following our practices because they would like to see how and to find the better way to do the business in tourism. But of course, it was a long walk, not only talk about sustainability. And of course, on one hand, we did a lot of job on the promotional side, because we wanted to position us on the global markets as a green, active, and healthy destination. And that we also know that we have the opportunity to develop boutique style, innovative, and sustainable products with high added value. And that's why the main objective also included the focus on IT supported and innovative marketing of Slovenia tourism. But with the green scheme, I think that we finally found the answer how to deal with it. When I talk about the promotional aspects, I would really like to point out the I feel Slovenia slogan. We had a concourse more than 15 years ago, and every citizen of Slovenia could share his idea of national slogan. Special commission choose I feel Slovenia, that at first was meant to be just a slogan, but it soon became a brand, and it was done a bit unusual way, but it was daring, open, and inclusive concept. And I think not only Slovenians, but also people from other parts from Europe and also other parts of the world accepted this national brand. And it is a little special because anyway, Slovenia is the only land with love in its name. But of course, as you mentioned, you have to deliver what you promise. We promise the green and active and healthy destination. We infrastructure has to follow, and in this moment, we are in a big investment cycle for with more than 150 million euros from recovery and resilience plan in the accommodation infrastructure. All it has to be built in energy efficient manner. That is very important. On the other hand, we really need to do a lot of work with our stakeholders, and the green scheme is a part of this big challenge for us. The green scheme of Slovenian tourism is actually a tool developed at the national level, and the certification program that carries out the following task under the Slovenian Green Umbrella brand, because Slovenia is a pioneer in the field of strategic sustainable tourism development. 280 Slovenian destination and tourism service providers have successfully obtained the Slovenia Green Label, which reflects their sustainable approach and responsible behavior towards the environment.
What do you think were the best practices that were widely embraced and everybody was very keen and engaged into developing them and executing them?
Well, I think that, okay, first of all, you need to take a decision about it. You have to be precise about it. You have to have a story behind it. You have to have a promise behind it. And firstly, that has to be done on the national level. But later on, you really need a very precise communication with all the stakeholders. The clear communication was very important, and Slovenian Tourist Board did a great job about it. They are still now in very active communication with destinations and also with key stakeholders on one hand. But on the other hand, we had to provide the tool how to follow all these promises. I think that certification program was the most important thing that we implemented. And because of the Slovenian mentality, it was very important to implement the international certification standards, not our own, not only Slovenians, because otherwise I think we would not follow them as we should. But now at this moment we are in the position that that our standards are even getting more difficult to follow than Europeans one. We have very strict legislation, but now when we have tenders for energy efficient accommodation projects, they even have to go 20% above the national legislation. So it's very difficult for them to follow. But we think this is the only way how to realize the goals that we have in front of us.
It's interesting that in many cases, the targets and the goals that are set by the leadership team or the governance of a destination or perhaps the tourism board are mostly communicated from a marketing point of view rather than an operational point of view. So perhaps the tourism operators of a destination would look at something, some advertising, some campaign in the media saying, are we doing that? Really? We didn't know. And because somewhere, somehow, the communication flow is broken, and we fail to train the tourism operator of the destination way before we start promoting the destination per se. So if you look at the tourism operators of Slovenia today, knowing that they are doing so well already because it's in their gene, it's in their DNA, the hospitality, the sense of nature, the spirit of respect, in communion with what we have. It's, what do you think these operators need the most today to, to go to the next level, really?
Our goal now is really to be as much as possible energy efficient on one hand. On the other hand, we are implementing some practices. For example, in Slovenia, there are events that are still very, very a big part of tourism operations. We are still learning all together how to organize all those big events in the sustainable manner. And also, we are implementing now managers for sustainability for big events, so they can prepare all the protocols that needed to be followed when you organize an event. So there are issues now. Really need to promote those practices. We do that through the workshops and also with the direct communications with the destinations and stakeholders.
And this is something that a proactive approach, this is how a proactive approach to tourism development looks like, especially for niche tourism objectives. Like, for example, yes, Slovenia has a very precious coastline, as we mentioned before. However, most of the tourism, it is developed and sort of presented as a full-on nature immersion in the green, in the forest, inland, so to speak. And what I noticed in most recently, especially since tourism really picked up after the pandemic, and many of the statistics that we've been reading are more than encouraging, are really, really good. And we look at how operators have been wanting to go back to business, right? To get back to what they do best. And they were clashing with the type of tourism that was coming to the destination. So they were like ready to welcome travelers from all around the world once again. And then they faced a whole different range of tourists that perhaps weren't behaving just as much as they were expecting. Is this the case of Slovenia? I mean, have you noticed a shift in the type of tourists that are coming to the destination?
I must say that during the COVID period, pandemic time, the government implemented some very good practices, like we had vouchers. And Slovenian stakeholders, tourism providers, reacted with higher prices. Let me explain this. All the Slovenian citizens received the certain amount of vouchers, and they could use in our hotels and restaurants and so on. And since people got those vouchers, they did not ask about the price. So prices were quite elevated because of that. But this is also the reason that now Slovenia, it's not always affordable to all the tourists. So maybe we are not facing the problems like some other destinations are. But on the other hand, of course, also in Slovenia, we have some points of interest that are more flooded than other, and we are just now developing a national information center, digital, of course, So we will be able to follow all these tourism flows, and maybe at least a little bit to redirect them to the other interesting points in Slovenia. So we will be able to implement more sustainable practices, because if you have too many tourists, that's impossible.
This happens when tourists' values are aligned with the destination values. And Slovenia puts these values way in front of every single message that gets put out, whether it's on social media, on the website, on the campaign, even on the collaborations and on the associations that the destination carries on. Like obviously you align yourself with other stakeholders or other professionals or organizations around the world, and people are observing this system, this approach to tourism development. So everybody's looking at Slovenia right now, but who is Slovenia looking up to?
Okay. We definitely try to align with our neighbors like Austria, Switzerland, Germany also, because we are part of this Alpine region, and our neighbors developed some practices that we tried to follow in the past. But we learned that copying something is not good enough. You just need to understand it. So we really started our own way, and it is very important. Values are very important for us, since we put forward our people, our heritage, our character. We really want the guests, not tourists, guests who are coming to Slovenia to cherish this, because as when you work in a tourism, you are exposed as a human being, and of course we want to accept everyone who comes to Slovenia, but we also want them to accept us. We are as we are, and we also understand that we need to think instead of our guests. So maybe this is also our secret ingredient, because we really want to the guests to feel not only welcome, but also that everything is taken care of. So they can be careless in Slovenia, because we are also one of the safest, not only because we are one of the safest country in the world. I think we are still on the 5th place, but also because we think it's our business to take care for them.
Imagine, for example, a guest. I love that you call travelers, tourists to your destination, you call them your guest, which is the essence, the primal essence of hospitality, right? So they are guests in your home, and therefore, you're looking after them. And when I look at the way today technology is merging and is somehow enhancing the hospitality world, I can't help but thinking that a person that comes to a hotel or, visits a landmarks or goes outside seeing, will not go home and complain. And perhaps, the hotel has an app or a online booking system or something like that. That person will not go home complaining that the app wasn't working at the hotel, but the person will go home complaining if that person had a bad service. Today's approach to technology when it comes to tourism and hospitality is going to grow, and is going beyond what the world of hospitality as we know it used to be. So that's why I'm thinking, if someone would go back home and tell their friends and family members how the holiday was, that person wouldn't go out and describe, I was at the hotel and the app wasn't working. But he would say, yes, I was at the hotel and the receptionist was terrible, for example. And they will remember the human experience of it. How are you embracing across the destination? How are you embracing technology within the hospitality world and within the tourism organizations that are currently operating in Slovenia?
We have to use technology, we have to use digitalization, we have to use automatization, and it makes perfect sense to some point. Not in all the aspects. I think still people need to do some processes, but of course we should use the technology to help us, and we will have to use it because statistic is not in our favor right now. Tourism sector employs right now, I think, about 6% of active Slovenian manpower. Those numbers are quite the same that we had before the pandemic. On the other hand, we have also 60% people 60% more accommodations in Slovenia after COVID, because from other economy sector, people invested now in the tourism because they see it's a future in it. But of course, for all those processes, you need manpower. So we will not be able to provide it in Slovenia, also not in wider Balkan region, because they're skipping Slovenia. They want to go. They will want to go to Italy, to Switzerland, to Austria, Germany, and so on. So we have to find the way through digitalization, through automatization. So technology is important. But the most important thing that people remember when we go somewhere is how we feel around the people we visit. So this is why, especially for me, is very important that we invest in people who work in tourism and in human capital that we have in our country.
And you mentioned before the Slovenian mindset. Tell me a little bit more about that. What do you think? Where do you see challenges today when you look at the tourism development of the country in relation to the local mindset?
You have always different phases in development of tourism on some destinations. Though Slovenia is a very small country, on the other hand, we have different frequencies of tourism development. We have some parts that are already very developed, and you have very strong impact of tourism. Other parts are still developing and trying to catch up. In the parts of Slovenia who are trying to catch up, there are still local people who are very keen of tourism. They love it. They embrace it. They want to help, and so on. On the other hand, we already have some destinations that we face over tourism. So if I would say horizontally all over Slovenia, I think that people can see the important impact of tourism. But I think that the most important mission that we have now on the political side, on the governmental side, on the governance side, that we provide such kind of tourism that also our citizen will be able to align with. So that they will recognize all the good impacts that tourism brings, and that they will be able to confront also all the challenges that tourism brings along.
Good challenges, I hope, something that would encourage them to push forward, to improve, to open their horizon, and to deliver something truly magnificent. And I know Slovenia has, from a natural asset point of view, you are so gifted, and the key is now to bring on board the entire tourism organization's ecosystem and all the stakeholders that play a role within the one the one scope of delivering upon that promise that has been made and that has been communicated worldwide. I'm just curious as I always see a tourism destination from a traveler perspective, and as I travel a lot, I am a traveler first. I love to experience firsthand what is happening, on the ground. Like, for example, when I was down in Greece or in Montenegro, in Spain most recently, and I get to see what the tourism operator do and how do they actually interact, because if you're in a hotel, you get the training, you get the hotel culture, and you're constantly coached to deliver a certain standard. But if you're like, for example, if you're a restaurant owner along the beach somewhere down in the south of Spain, for example, there is no one to check what kind of standards of hospitality you're delivering, right? So we're really putting a lot of trust in the local operators, hoping that they are delivering upon the promise that we are, going out and about and communicating around the world. When we last met, we spoke about setting the standards for the hospitality and tourism and travel operators delivering across the destination, not just setting the standards, but also having a process of auditing these standards and actually going out and check that they're doing a good job and they're not actually scaring the tourist away. Would you tell me a little bit about those standards and what are the auditing processes in place in Slovenia?
When we started to implement this green scheme of Slovenian tourism, of course, we started with many workshops for stakeholders, for different levels of stakeholders, because we knew that we really need to communicate this very thoroughly. Otherwise, stakeholders just won't follow. On the other hand, of course, we implemented international standards for destinations, for restaurants, for hotels, for travel agencies, for events, for everything. So then, of course, they can apply for this one of those nominations, and even receive it very fast. But of course, the devil hides always in the small details. Later on in 3 years, they have to report the progress and what they achieved. So it's quite difficult for them to follow all this, but it's no other way to be done.
That's the only way to achieve excellence, to actually be able
Yes.
to measure. If you don't measure, how do you know you are improving? How do you know that you need more? And what do you need to get better and to achieve the targets that have been set for you? And also to take personal responsibility, right? Because you empower them to prove to themselves first that they can excel, that they can really, truly deliver the most authentic hospitality across the destination, and then to be proud of it. When local operators grow fond of their own achievement and the work that they're putting out, they just get better and better, because something kicks in whereby they become personally involved in, and it becomes personal. Exactly. And I think I've seen it in many places where perhaps it wasn't about the government and it wasn't about the marketing global campaign strategies around the world. They just owned their game. They just knew what was right to do, what it meant to welcome travelers from around the world. They didn't make any distinction. They didn't make any preferences. Everybody was equal and everybody was equally welcomed, which I think is the case when we look at a tourism that is more inclusive, that is more responsible, not just for the environment but also for the people, as we are people delivering for other people. And I see a lot of that in the strategies of Slovenia. So I'm really happy we had this conversation today on the podcast, and that our podcast listeners had a chance to learn a little bit about what's happening behind the scenes, and who is actually hard at work to implement all this beautiful, it's a message out there, but that's a lot of work that happens behind the scene to make sure that the work is done and the message that is delivered is actually executed properly. So thank you so much for taking the time for joining me today. Meanwhile, the contact details of the Slovenia Tourist Board, for those who want to learn more about the destination, will be in the show notes. And for those stakeholders who want to perhaps have a conversation with you and with your team at the ministry, and perhaps open up a window of collaboration and opportunities, also feel free to get in touch through the contact details that will be placed in the show notes. Thank you, Dubravka, for joining me today on the podcast. It's been lovely to having you here and to have this conversation. I hope it's not the last. And I wish you all the best for the work ahead.
Thank you for inviting me in your podcast. And I'm very grateful for this opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining me today. Slovenia has had a lot to learn, and boy, they fast-tracked everyone else in Europe. Well done, Slovenia. More on the show notes, and don't forget to share this episode on your social media channels if you loved it, or send me your review or feedback, because I love hear from you. So speak soon again. Meanwhile, be well and keep traveling.